In this tutorial, I'd like to introduce you to some features of this Presto movement from Sonata No. 6 in C minor by Giovanni Battista Pescetti. It's in the current grade 4 piano syllabus for ABRSM. Pescetti is firmly in the Baroque period, which we generally say is 1600 to 1750. For piano music purposes, more or less 1685 when Bach was born to 1750, the year he died. So Pescetti is also in that time period. This piece starts to show some of the features of sonata form as we later know it with composers like Mozart, Beethoven, even later periods, Brahms, Schumann, and so forth. But it's still in its early form, so some of the formal features that you learn for sonata movements aren't quite there, but they're just hinted at, and that's exactly what I'd like to take you through. So let me list the terminology first that we'll talk about. Sonata form, the sections, exposition, development, and recapitulation. Relative keys, the relative major and minor keys. Modulation, how you change from one key to the next. And in this particular phrase, half cadences, or imperfect cadences, I should say, are going to figure prominently. So the piece starts in C minor. If I play the first phrase for you and talk you through it. That's the first phrase. It's essentially 2 times the same thing. And both times you notice it comes to a stopping point, but it doesn't sound like it's finished. That's what we're calling the imperfect cadence. It ends on a 5 chord. I'm playing slowly so you can hear things. That's intentional. So I've just played G's, which are the dominant of C minor, and the whole measure outlines the whole chord with the B natural. And that repeats. So we finish a phrase, but it doesn't even sound like it's come to a complete cadence, which is true. It goes on through a series of chords. And through that series of chords, how the composer is working with those harmonies, we arrive at what is E flat major, where I just stopped. That's the relative major to C minor. It has the same key signature, 3 flats. So C minor is the relative minor to E flat major. E flat major is the relative major to C minor. And that's a very typical modulation, a change of keys that you will hear in a sonata movement, particularly a sonata movement that starts in a minor key. So we started in C minor, we modulate to E flat major. So the rest of the first section stays in E flat major. This is where I left off. So we end with a very strong cadence, perfect cadence in E flat major. Then what the composer does is takes the opening theme, but now writes it in the key where we've now arrived. So you hear the opening, you hear the first theme, but it's transposed to E flat major. And it still ends with that same half cadence, imperfect cadence, which means we've now just played a B flat major chord. And then when it repeats. And then the piece simply starts over with the opening theme. We'll go through the first and second phrases exactly the same way with a variation, which I'll get to in a moment. But let's talk about this 8-measure phrase here in the middle, because it's a short little interlude, one would say. It's not a full-fledged development like you'll see in later sonata movements. But it's this composer's recognition: I've arrived in E flat major, I need to state the theme again in E flat major, and then after that happens, the recapitulation simply starts. There's a quick jump from that B flat major chord to C minor. So now we're starting over, which I already mentioned the term for that, recapitulation. And we arrive at E flat major just like we do at the beginning. We modulate to E flat major. But we can't stay there because the piece has to end. And as you know, with pieces of this time period, the ending is going to be in the same key as the beginning, C minor. So the composer introduces this modulation to E flat major, but quickly makes a winding turn so that the phrase ends in C minor again. So listen to this recapitulation. So there's essentially the same length as the exposition, but we've firmly arrived back in C minor from where we started. And then there are some phrases, more or less coda, in order to finish the piece out, which stay in C minor as well. So that is your basic introduction to some of the terminology for sonata form in its earliest form. This is still Baroque period, but some of these formal ideas and modulations are already taking shape. So the next video in the series should be a full, complete performance of this piece. If you want to listen to it its entirety and follow the cadences, the key relationships, and the formal sections.